I did a video on the associative property, so I guess I wanted to do a video on the commutative property. Now, these are pretty basic concepts. I think they start going over them in like second grade or something. But in terms of order of operations, they become, relevant again. So I'll just throw them out there. So just to go over what the associative property is, if I were to say 3 times 5 plus 3, okay? So with order of operations, I would do 8, 5 plus 3 equals 8, and then 3 times 8 equals 24, right? But I could also do 3 times 5 and then plus 3 times 3. Okay? So, this is actually the same concept that you use when you break a number like, let's say, 43 times 21, and then you break 20 and 1 and 40 and 3, and it's actually the same concept um, of the associative property. Okay, so anyway, so that's the associative property, and just to be clear, if this was a subtraction, you would just do a subtraction there. So that's the associative property. But the commutative property is specifically for multiplication and addition, and it basically says 3 times, and then if I were to say 5 times 3, okay, or 6 plus 6 plus 4, these parentheses are unneeded, basically, and it doesn't matter what order you do only multiplication in or what order you do only addition in. So for division and subtraction, definitely matters. But for multiplication and division, 3 times 5 is 15, times 3 is 45. Well, I guess let me just switch one of these numbers up so that they're not just 3s and 5s. And I'll do the same thing here. But so in this case, 3 times 5 is 15. 15 times 4 is 60. 5 times 4 is 20, times 3 is 60. Doesn't matter which order you multiply these numbers in. And this is, I guess, specifically useful, 5th grade wise, for doing volume, because you're multiplying 3 numbers at a time, length, width, and height. So you can multiply them in any order. Technically, the equation is length times width times height, but you could do height times length times width. At any order you want to do them in is fine. And for addition, it's the same thing, right? 6 plus 2 is 8, plus 4 is 12. I mean, you can literally think about having 6 objects, 2 objects, and 4 objects, and then just switching the order they're in. Obviously, you can add in any order you want to add in. So just to go over, so we went over the associative property, and this is just the commutative property. It only works for multiplication and division. Now, if I were to let's just say 40 divided by now we can't just do 40 divided by so if we were doing order of operations, it would be 5 times 4 would be 20. 40 divided by 20 would be 2. But if we were to do 40 and then we were try to you know, I guess do this out in either the associative property or the commutative property. It just wouldn't work. So just to be clear, yeah, I would say to realize that the associative and commutative property only work for multiplication and addition, and subtraction subtraction and division would not work. So I'll just throw one out here. So if we do this from left to right, which would be order of operations, 40 divided by 8 would be 5. Then we would have 5 divided by 2, which would be 2.5, right? Or 5 halves. But if we were to do 8 divided by 2 first, okay, that would be 4, and then 40 divided by 4 equals 10. So just realize that, the associative property and the commutative property really only work for multiplication and addition, and for division or subtraction, they are not going to work.